This is the Mental Health in Recruitment podcast. I'm Rhonda D'Ambrosio, and I'm on a mission to drive positive change to the understanding of mental health issues in the recruitment industry in order to improve lives and improve business. In today's episode, I'm joined by James Osborne, the chairman of the Recruitment Network, otherwise known as TRN. James, I've been hassling you for a while to come and speak to me, and due to my poor scheduling and planning, it's taken a while to get you here, but it's great to see you. Welcome on.
No, lovely to see you too. And I reckon actually, if you put together all the conversations that we've had like this over the years, we'd have a great podcast that we could just mull it together and send out. So no, lovely to see you properly today.
We've been having lots of conversations about a world in COVID, post-COVID, Freedom Day and everything else. So I'm sure that today's episode is gonna cover lots of different aspects of mental health, not just in recruitment, but generally. I can't imagine a recruitment world where nobody knows who you are, James, but it would be great if there is somebody out there that's just joined us on the planet of recruitment and doesn't know who you are. Maybe you could tell us a bit about how you got into the industry, how long you've been doing what you're doing, and kind of what your role at the Recruitment Network is all about.
Yeah, no, sure. Thank you. So I've been in the industry probably for about 25, 26 years. Started out, fell into recruitment, I think like most people tend to do. I was over in Australia at the time doing something completely different. I was working on boats and sailing and scuba diving and having some fun stuff. Ended up doing some temp work in a recruitment company. Got really into it, really enjoyed it. Ended up getting sponsored by that company, did pretty well there, became a sales director in a pretty short space of time. I then got headhunted across by a lady called Therese Rain, who was the wife of the ex-Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd in Australia. And worked for her for a number of years in a recruitment capacity with her sort of big global business. So at a very young age, I got exposed to some really interesting parts of business, running business, sitting at board level and different stuff. So I really, really thoroughly enjoyed it. Love recruitment, love the impact recruitment could make. And then I suppose it must have been about 17 years ago now, I came back to the UK, moved down to Bath, set up another company, which I still have today, which is an advisory and consultancy business with Gordon, my business partner, who you know. And then, and I think just by default, because my background was in recruitment, we naturally started working with lots of recruitment companies. So we ended up in a situation, if I fast forward to sort of today, where we've got a business which is an advisory company to non-recruitment companies that we work with banks and law firms and a few other funding organizations. And then we've got the Recruitment Network, which in essence is a club, I suppose, or a community of recruitment business leaders that we sort of help guide and facilitate together, who work together, collaborate, share best practice. We guide them on their journey and help them go from where they are today to wherever they want to go tomorrow, and whatever that might look like, whether it be startup, whether it be through to an exit, or it's just growth or whatever really. So been a lot of fun actually. I love the industry and I love being in the industry. It's quite interesting though, because you say about everyone knowing everyone, it's such a small world. It really, really is. I mean, everybody knows everybody in the recruitment world. I'm convinced by it, sort of stuff. So
well, it's funny, isn't it? Because I've been in the industry not quite as long as you, 24 years, nearly 25, and I didn't really know you particularly well. I think I'd seen you come up on LinkedIn, and it was Paul at Penta who put you on my radar by sharing a copy of a book with me that I'm sure we're going to talk about a bit later. And yeah, it's funny how you realise that we are. It's so incestuous. We're all interconnected, and. One of my favorite things about talking to people that have been in the industry a long time is, why do we all say the same thing? How we all fell into recruitment. I don't know if I've met anyone yet that's actually decided they want a career in our industry. I'm sure they're out there. I'd love to hear from anyone. How did you fall into it?
Well, I mean, literally, I was in Sydney, and a very long story. I was in Sydney, and I needed to get some work, some temp work. So at the time, I was teaching sailing on yachts in Sydney Harbour, which is wonderful. But there's only so much of that you can do at a certain time, and it wasn't enough to fill a full day or a full week. So I ended up getting a temp job through someone I knew in a recruitment company, a big global recruitment business in the middle of Sydney. And my first job, I was actually telling my son about this the other day, actually. So my first temp job was working at Sydney airports. This is through a recruitment company at Sydney airports. And our job was to audit and measure the waste on the night shift at Sydney Airport. So we would literally be in the basement, about 6 or 7 of us in this basement under Sydney airports in the middle of the night, because we were on double time, so it was good money. And basically a bag of rubbish would come down this chute. We literally have to open up the bag of rubbish, see what was inside it, and write down, okay, there's McDonald's wrappers, or there's this and there's that, a little audit, tie it back up again, and then stick it out into the rest of the rubbish. So I did that as my first ever temping job through a recruitment company. I thought, is this my life now? Is it working on the night shift into the airport? But it was great. And I say it was good money, and it allowed me to go sailing during the day, which is even better. So so that was quite fun. And then I ended up getting a temp job actually in the recruitment company doing some administration. And I think you know me well enough now. I'm a bit of a nosy bee, and I started looking at some of the things they were doing, and I met the global boss because he was over one day, over from Canada at the time. And I just said, look, just by the way, you don't know me, I'm just a temp here, but I reckon there's a couple of things you're not doing probably as well as you could do. There might be a better way of doing it. So here's a couple of ideas. And then cut a long story short, they ended up sponsoring me, and I ended up becoming a sales director there. So it was quite good. So
that's amazing.
That's why I think a lot of people have that sort of journey. I think, that sort of story is something similar, where you're in it and suddenly realize, actually, this is quite a fun industry to be in. There's a lot you can do a lot in the recruitment sector in a very, very short space of time, which is great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've got to ask you, I've got to take you back. Why were you auditing the rubbish? I need to know this. What did they need that for?
It was money. Why were we doing?
Not why were you doing it. Like, why did they need you to do it?
I was doing it for the money. They were doing it, I think, more to understand of what was happening from an environmental point of view. So how much rubbish was actually getting put away? Was it all plastics? Was it all this? Which of the outlets within Sydney airports were the ones who are creating the most rubbish, and probably they can therefore charge them more money, I would imagine, etc. So.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff.
I was thinking, wow, that was quite ahead of the time back then, environments and plastics and measurement. But yeah, you're right, probably money.
Yeah.
So interesting. This is one of the things I do love about these types of conversations. You learn things about people that you just don't know. How interesting. So bringing it back to, what we're here to talk about today, and mental health in the industry and mental health in recruitment. When somebody says mental health to you, what does that term mean? How have you kind of described that to yourself or others previously?
So how I describe it to myself, possibly it might be different for how I might talk about it in public. And the reason why I say that is I'm not trained in mental health or mental well-being, that type of stuff. So sometimes it's very easy to say the wrong thing when you don't mean to say it, basically when you're not trained and really understand it. So the way I look at mental health is I very much focus on what you can do as opposed to what you're not able to do. So I look at mental health as more being mentally resilient, mentally strong, what you can do with your mental well-being to allow you to be better and more and happier and more successful. I'm not very good personally at looking back on stuff and going, mental health is about fixing all the problems and issues and challenges that we've got. I'm not very good at looking at issues and challenges. I don't really understand that as a concept. I think it's something I've trained myself to do. So to me, mental health is about being mentally resilient, positively mentally resilient. So you can then enjoy what you do and be happier with what you do and more content with what you've got.
I really like that. And, what I find quite interesting is there's a number of people that I've spoken to over the years that have a very, very similar outlook. And I'd like to think that mine is somewhat similar to you. I am a solutions orientated person. So for me, that what you're saying about the resilience aspect and that mental resilience and wellness, I totally get that. I think what rings true is that people that have an outlook like that typically have faced a challenge or numbers of different challenges throughout their life that have kind of influenced perhaps that way of thinking. Now, I'm sure that isn't the case for everybody, but knowing a bit about you, and you and I had a conversation last year where you were talking to me about the stuff I'd overcome. What are the biggest things that have happened to you in your life that you think may have impacted kind of your outlook and your view of the world when it comes to mental resilience?
It's a really interesting question. I think the one thing I'll say is I think everybody faces challenges, and I think because of COVID, we've all opened up a lot more about who we are and what we're feeling and that type of stuff, which I think is a good thing. And you start realizing actually there's a lot of people go through a hell of a lot of stuff, which I'm very sorry about for a lot of people. And you look at some of the things that I complain about sometimes when I wake up in the morning, my hair's not great, or my hair's never great, but my hair's a mess, or I've got a headache, or whatever it might be. And you think you just take a step back for a second and compare yourself to what other people are going through right now. It's not a big deal. So I think everyone goes through challenges. I think everything you do in your life molds what happens next, how you think, how you behave, and how you respond. And I'm not a psychologist in the sense of you can look back and say how my parents treated me impacted this. I don't get all that. I don't understand that. I'd make my own decisions, I think. But there are fundamental things that happened in my world that have certainly dictated how I feel about stuff. As a kid, from a positive point of view, I had fantastic parents who were very liberal. Actually, they treated me like as an adult. So they allowed me to go off traveling around the world and doing stuff that I probably shouldn't have been doing half the time. But, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids to be doing half the time, but I did. And I got to taste the world and really experience different cultures and things. That was amazing. Sadly, my parents divorced when I was quite young. So that was even I remember the day actually when my father sort of told me that he was leaving, and it was really interesting because my immediate response was, "Oh, great! That means I'm going to have two houses." It's my first thing that I said, not from a monetary point of view. I thought that's cool. I could totally get this sort of stuff. So I didn't really think about what the impact it makes. And I think, but you look at people lose parents. Divorce all the time and that type of stuff, and that just changes your thinking about what's important. I came a lot closer with my mother because of it, and so on and so forth. And then as I sort of started going into the world of adulthood, if I can use that expression, we had probably about 16 years ago, my wife and I had a baby called Toby, who we called TJ, Toby James. And sadly, when he was born, he ended up with a disease, basically an infection that infected his sort of early childhood, and sadly he passed away at a very young age. So we spent a really interesting time for us, and I do look at it from now as a fascinating thing to understand. I'm really trying to understand what this is all about, why it happened. So we spent a lot of time in an intensive care unit down in Bath at the time. That was really fascinating because you get to meet the most extraordinary people. I mean, literally, I call them angels. They really are angels. Every year we get a card still from one of the nurses at the intensive care unit talking about Toby and asking how we are. I mean, it's just, why would you do that with the amount of children that go through this? So we met some incredible people. I met some incredible parents who are going through similar situations to us, or even worse situations than us from that point of view. But it's a really difficult time. And when it happened, and I remember when we had the funeral, it was the first time all of my mates had got back together again for something serious. We've never had it. So we were the first sort of family, I suppose, that had the biggest issue that went on. So, you then got all of your mates coming around to a funeral. These are the mates I'd go to the pub with and everything else. We were all still quite young at that point, and quite carefree. And suddenly we're at a funeral. I'm carrying a coffin of my son into, it's weird. It's really, really weird. And it's really emotional, but it's almost it's almost unbelievable. You can't actually imagine this is happening. And I think, I suppose we'll talk about how people respond to these things. I think I responded to it probably in a good way for me at the time, probably not necessarily the right way to do it from a mental well-being perspective. But yeah, so I think, the biggest thing for me, my father passed away early when, he had leukemia, sadly, and that type of stuff. So we all have these, and we've all got these stories. I suppose my thing for me, the fundamental shift in my life and my world was Toby, because I remember when he was born, it was like, the aspiration of having, a child playing rugby in the first 15. And it was, I imagined he was going to be this, and I was imagining he's going to be that, etc. And then you just lose all those hopes and you feel so empty. It's the most incredible. I remember the day we went home. I'm sorry if I'm rattling on a bit, but I remember the day we went home after the hospital after he passed away. We literally went back to our house and we sat in our room, and luckily my in-laws had gone back to the house and taken away all the sort of the baby stuff, the cost and everything else. And we just sat there and just literally what happens now? Just what do you do? It's very, very weird.
How old were you, James?
How old was I? So I would have been 30, so just my early 30s, so 30, 31, 32, I think.
And was TJ your first child?
Yeah. So he was our first child. And remember, when I say I was in my early 30s, I didn't start work till very late. I spent a lot of my life traveling around the world, bumming around, big hair and being silly and that sort of stuff. So I'm quite immature from that point of view, which I'm very proud about. And I love the fact that, so, being 30 for me, I still felt like a 16-year-old at the time, or an 18-year-old sort of thing. So
it's I think hearing from any parent about that type of situation is hard. We have spoken about it before, and I'm very grateful for you agreeing to come and speak about Toby again, especially on the podcast. You said so much in that sentence that I don't think I can unpick all of it, but the thing that jumped out there is there's two things. I want to come back to the first question in a second. You mentioned that your family or in-laws went back to the house and almost, you know, cleared it of what, you know, baby paraphernalia, like the cots and everything else. Did that help, or did it help? Like, was that short-term sticky plaster of, oh, good, that's not there, so we don't have to think about it? Or was it harder? You know, as a mum, I'm trying to imagine all traces of evidence that there was a baby in the house removed, and that really gets me inside.
Yeah, do you know what? Everything everybody did over that period was right and wrong. You know, so I had some very close friends who said all the wrong things, did all the wrong things, even though they absolutely tried to do the right things. I had some amazing people. No, we're lucky to be surrounded by incredible friends. So I was very fortunate. Was it right? Was it wrong? It was right at the time, in the sense of, I think it would have really hurt us to have seen all that stuff, because they're all the dreams, right? You know, you go to mamas and papas, whatever they call them. I don't know, mamas and mummy baby.
Mums and papas.
Is it mums and papas?
We've got a couple of cots there. Yeah.
It's been a while now. You know, but you go down to those places, you know, and you sit and you walk around, and they convince you to buy the most expensive one because it's your baby. And this, you know, so it's all really, really exciting. So we had all the house all kitted out and everything. But because we had spent all of Toby's life in the intensive care unit, I mean, he never left the intensive care unit. The neonatal intensive care, and basically, so we would literally spend like 18 hours, 19 hours a day in this thing, and it's a very strange place because it's very dark, even though it's light outside 24/7. So, you know, our expectation of having Toby was in this intensive care unit. So to have it come out of that into an environment which was all very pretty and flowery and lots of, you know, all the nice stuff that you would do for a child, actually it would have felt strange, I think, actually. So in a bizarre sort of way, when we came back, it felt really, really numb, but actually maybe in a way that was quite a good thing, because it allowed us to basically go, right, well, it's just like, this is weird and it is just stopped, and now we move on. Yeah, in some way.
I don't think in that situation, is there a right, is there a wrong way? I think we're all different types of people, and in some respects, it's, yeah, I'm sure there would be some people that would think, why delay the inevitable? Why cause yourself, you know, more hurt and heartache, I guess. Thinking back to, you know, before you, I love how you've described yourself as, did you say immature? Because I feel rude if I say that.
Yeah, I still am. I still am, by the way. I'll make that clear.
You know, that the person that you were, maybe very carefree, happy-go-lucky, and had quite an enriched life up to that point. You know, I guess, how did that change you as a person? You know, who did you become, you know, after losing TJ?
Yeah, and this is one of the things that I've been trying to study in myself for years. So I'm a very inward-looking person. I spend a lot of time looking at myself and my behaviors and how I respond to stuff. I find it interesting, fascinating, and almost, you know, I like to understand how I'm feeling and why I do things. I think actually what happened is I didn't go to counselling, and I didn't do all the things that I probably should have done potentially, and I may still will do one day. I'm not sure, but what sort of happened is I found that all of the things about me intensified, if that made sense. So my desire to go and live my life in a carefree way sort of really increased, almost like did the opposite. Yeah, so I think everything just intensified a little bit, really, and I made a commitment. I made it to Toby when he was alive, and I was holding his hand at the time, and said, you know, whatever happens in this, I will commit to living my life to the absolute max, to the absolute full, and that's like work, that's like living, that's like sport, everything I do. If you do it, go for it, like really go for it, and give everything, because this is what life is about. You've only got one chance to do stuff. And I realized that Toby didn't have that chance to go and do things. So for me, it was a really important reminder that, you know, if you get the opportunity to do things, just go and do it, but like really, really go for it. So that's what I've always done in my life. And I think, you know, how did it change me? I think it made me more focused, to probably quite aggressively focused, but really, really focused to just do stuff. I don't sleep very much. I mean, everyone knows that I don't sleep very much. Maybe to my detriment. I'll probably find out one day when I just probably keel over. But to me, I see sleep almost as waste, and that's a terrible thing to say. And again, this is where I say to you about my having me on a podcast like this could be the worst thing that you've ever done. But but I see it as a bit of a waste, because it's time when I could be doing stuff. I could be creating a business, I could be helping someone else on their business, I could be running a marathon, I could be just doing something. So I see sleep as a little bit of wastage almost, type of thing. And I think that's one of the things where my life is intensified, is about, I just want to do things now. I want to live life and really embrace it. And I think, seeing what happened, I mean, the really not interesting thing, but I remember distinctively in the intensive care unit, we got to know, you get to know other parents who are in there. And there was one guy in there who his child was like 14 years old, literally woke up one morning with a terrible head thing or whatever, etc. Cut very long story short, whilst we're there, the child passed away. And I said to him something, I've lost like 30, 40 years of potential dreams. You've lost 14 years of reality. That's tough. That's really, really hard, I think. So to lose someone that you've spent a lot of time with, getting to know properly and having experiences with, that's really, really hard. So for me, again, it intensifies that feeling of, if you've got a chance, the most precious thing we have is time. What you do with your time is the most important thing. And I don't like wasting time. And I think that's the thing that really came out for me from Toby, is I refuse to waste my time on people I don't want to waste my time with, things I don't want to waste my time on. And not embracing the life that we've got, even though, as we were talking about earlier, the older we get, it aches a little bit more to do stuff. But the reality is, just get on with it and enjoy what we've got.
That's amazing. And hearing you talk about it in that way, what you're describing to me is almost that ability to tap into, maybe, I don't think you would have probably realized it, but it's a purpose. You're tapping into a purpose and a driver at what is a young age. Actually, the values work that I do with people, I don't think we start looking at our purpose until we get a bit older. I think some people do. I think you can make an active decision to look at what fuels you, or what your why is. You don't, maybe there are listeners that don't call it purpose, but it's their why. And you've had this why from a reasonably young age that has fueled you over the next couple of decades, and that's really powerful. And I think that's the stuff that I talk about with quality of thinking, and how, if you can harness that side of negative thinking, and if you can push that into a different view of the world, that can be very, very positive and supportive of mental health. So that I always, you see how through adversity some people shine and some people ring out. And you also said there, what was interesting, you said about that aggressively so. And do you think there are people out there that maybe don't know your story, that don't know the things that you've dealt with, and that, as I said, as a parent, is any parent's worst nightmare, right? And you've lived it. And people that don't know that you've experienced that, would they have seen maybe this aggressive version of you there? And when I say aggressive, I mean this relentless, this is how I see you, this relentless, driven, focused individual that doesn't accept, not anything less than perfection, but like you said, doesn't accept maybe wasted time or excuses. Do you think they would have had a view of you that is just misunderstood because they don't know where that comes from?
Yeah, possibly. I'll be very honest with you. I honestly don't really think about people's opinions of me. I used to a lot. I used to really, really think about what people thought about me, and it actually became something that, possibly because of what happened with Toby, is like, have I failed in some description? Have I got something wrong here? So therefore, I've got to try and do something completely different and better to therefore try and get that back. I don't know. So I used to think a lot about people's opinions. I really, really don't anymore. I mean, I really don't. And I find it almost, I don't know, the challenge you've got with these types of things is it's very easy to be seen, like I'm doing this podcast now, saying, well, actually, this is a great chance for James to put his sob story out, and to get a bit of sort of empathy on here and that type of stuff, get a couple of likes on social media. Is this all part of some clever ruse just to drive sales and bring more members into TRN? And there'll be people who will think that, of course, there are sort of stuff. And if that's what they think, absolutely fine. This is like, but for me, so I don't go around shouting about my story, But there again, on the opposite side, I've got no hesitation in talking about it. And it's, to me, I'd have it in a conversation with a pub, and if I've met someone for the first time, I don't think about it as this really big thing anymore. I see it as something that happened to me. I think things happen to everybody. It was my thing. You'll never understand unless you were me what it felt like at that time and some of those different moments. But that's my thing. So, you know, why do I talk about it? Why do I speak about it? I think it's just because if people feel that they have a situation that is holding them back from anything, then I think they need to release that. And for me, if I can in some way basically say, look, I've gone through some pretty rubbishy times in this experience, as we all have. But I found a clever way, maybe, of trying to use it in a positive way as a step ladder up. If you could maybe do something similar to that in your way, and I'm not going to judge you right or wrong either way, sort of stuff, then maybe that's a good thing, and that's a cool thing, you know. And I love it. You know, I'm very active on social media. I love being on Facebook and Instagram and putting pictures up of me playing golf with my kids and that type of stuff, you know. And I'm the first one to write hashtag good times and all that sort of stuff, and love where you live, you know. And some people love that, some people hate that. Oh, look at him, he's just showing off, whatever. And the reality, I do it because I like to bring a smile on people's faces and let people know that just go and do stuff, you know. I have conversations with people all the time. They're saying, oh, life is really bad, and I can't do this, can't do that. I said, well, you could say that, or you could actually just quickly do a little right turn pivot and go and do something a little bit different. And I can't judge you if you can and can't do that. I probably can't even help you do that necessarily. But all I can say is I do it, and it sort of works well for me. So if things aren't working well for you, maybe try it as an option, because it does work. That sort of right turn pivot, I think, is quite handy.
I think you're hard on yourself when you say things like, you know, sob story. I think you're doing yourself a disservice there, James, because you said it. We all have a story. Some of us have a few stories, and hearing people talk about their challenges, their viewpoint, how they've used some of these experiences to move forward, there's great power in that. You know, we've talked about this before, the fact that somebody listening, you know, you give permission to other people to share their stories, and that's not what we've been very good at in society. You know, in the last couple, I think we've become much better at it now, probably in the last decade. But prior to that, if you think about the world where we grew up, where, you know, people, especially men, didn't talk about their feelings, didn't talk about these challenges, it was just buried and put in a box. I think it, you know, it has to be discussed, it has to be spoken about, because it would be very easy for anyone to think, oh, look at that person, isn't he lucky, you know, hasn't he got a good life, wow, you know, I love seeing your pictures, you know, with the sea and the stuff that you do with, you know, you've got 2 sons, you went on to have 2 more beautiful boys, and, you know, being able to reconcile that with what you know, where you've come from, I think is really important for the people, because it gives hope. And I think hope is very powerful when we talk about resilience, mental health, or anything like that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think hope is a massively important thing. You know, I'm definitely an optimist, and I always will be, and no one's ever going to change that. I think one of the biggest, I think, barriers when it comes to mental well-being is that we do care deeply about what people think. And that's a real problem, I think, a real problem. Now, people do things that it's not normally them because they're more concerned about what people will say and respond to it rather than they actually doing it for that sort of reason. So I think we've been talking a lot recently about, obviously, with the Olympics on and everything else, and, you know, I like to do much sort of triathlons and that sort of thing. And one of the expressions we use in triathlon in the Ironman is you versus you. I love it. I've got images all over my walls about it. It's like you versus you. It's like at the end of the day, and you look at the Olympics as a classic example, it doesn't really matter what everyone else is doing. It's basically how well are you going to do in comparison to what your potential is. And I love that as a concept. I live by it as a concept, which I think is so important. And the great thing about you versus you, by default, it means it doesn't matter about anybody else. It is just about you and what you want to do. So I think that's a really important part of this thing, is just understanding that you're not up against other people. You're not in competition with other people, even though they might try and think they're in competition with you. What you are actually in competition with yourself and your own potential.
Yeah, absolutely. You just stay in your own lane, measure yourself against yourself, and you can't go wrong. I think that's really powerful stuff. If we look at COVID, then we look at the landscape in the last 12 months, you know, you said earlier on that people have been, you know, far more open. People are talking about this stuff more, and yeah, you know, we've definitely seen that. I think that business owners and business leaders have definitely been more inclined to talk about the challenges that they've faced during the multiple lockdowns. You know, what's your recent, I guess, mental health journey look like? You know, I know from the work that we've done at Mental Health and Recruitment, you've had a different view on a few situations, but what's the last 12 months look like for you? You know, any big learns there?
Yeah, a huge amount of learns actually. I mean, and don't get me wrong, you know, I don't sit here every day in my office with a big smile on my face going, happy, everything's wonderful, and let's just all go skip off into the sunset. You know, I've had some very, very dark days and some very, very long weeks and everything like everybody else has. You know, but the reality is, I think if you look, COVID's been extraordinary, I think, for a whole host of reasons, as we know. The thing I find extraordinary about COVID, if you ignore it from what it's done to the business world and everything else, but what it's done from a people point of view is we are all forced our backs against the wall to try and go and figure this thing out. No one's an expert in this at all, even though a lot of people think they're experts, but no one's an expert in this at all. So we've all been trying to figuring it out from okay, how do I survive in this from a business point of view? How do I survive physically and health from that point of view? You know, what shouldn't I be doing, and that type of stuff. But more importantly, what we've been really figuring out is, how do I feel about all this? You know, what is right anymore? What is wrong anymore? And how we do things. And I think that's been brilliant. So consequently, a lot more people have now been going, I'm trying to understand, what does COVID actually mean in the grand scheme of things. So I'm going to reach out to more people to try and ask and find out what they're doing, what their opinions are, how they're handling this. I think because of that, the barriers between people have just really, really broken down. You know, and even though I haven't seen many of my good friends for a hell of a long time, you know, I know I'm closer to them than I've ever been before because of that. You know, members of TRN that we work with, you know, these are clients, they're customers of my company. I consider them to be very, very, very close friends. And, you know, I've got to learn a hell of a lot about our members. I've worked with business leaders who have been in tears. I've been in tears with them. You know, this is the sort of stuff you would never do before, because by doing that, you're demonstrating maybe a weakness or something. I don't know. But the reality is, we are all human beings. Well, at the end of the day, we all go home and have the same fears and trials and tribulations in different sort of guises and different formats. We all hurt when we fall over. It's the same thing. And I think, you know, we forget that sometimes. I think COVID has reminded us of that, which has been brilliant, I think. So has it been a tough 18 months from an emotional well-being perspective? Yeah, I think this has been a real challenging time. I think a lot of good has come out of it, though, because I think it's created more of an environment where people are going to be opening up a lot more. The sad thing about it is, at the same time, it's created a lot more, I suppose, mental challenges for a lot of people just because of lockdown and everything else. So let's look at the situation we're in. Is a transitional stage, I think. Coming out of COVID, which I think is where we're coming to now more and more, is when COVID starts to go away, people's lives come back to a new normality with a bit more freedom and those restrictions are gone. Then I'm hoping the skills that we've learned and the behaviors that we've learned over COVID will stay and will remain. You know, business is fun. I love business. I love pitching to customers and engaging with my clients, that type of stuff, because it's fun. I'm talking to a mate now because I genuinely want to help their business, not because I'm going to make an extra quid out of it. That purpose before profit motive type concept. And that's not me. That's half the companies out there are talking about this and doing this now. It's wonderful. Look what you're doing. It's exactly the same thing. Going out there and actually going, do you know what? Making a difference feels sort of pretty cool. And yes, you can probably make money out of it as well, which is even better, and survive, which we all have to do. But do you know, it actually feels pretty good to make a difference and go to people who potentially before you would never do so with and say, let's just get rid of all the rubbish. Let's just work together to make this work, figure this out, make sure you're happy, you're feeling good, your business is working, you're doing the right thing and everything else. So I think, you know, again, I'm putting my positive hat on, you know me, but, you know, I don't like global pandemics, not a fan, don't sign up to them. And I'm very sorry for some of the pain it's caused a lot of people and the challenges it's caused me and everything else and my family. But the reality is, I'm coming out the back of it, we're learning some really interesting skills. I had this conversation with my son, my youngest son, because we were talking about his first year at secondary school, which has been completely disruptive. It's been a bloody awful year for them and for him. And I feel really, really sorry for him. And we're saying all the things that he's missed out on and everything else. But I try to explain to them, but think of some of the new skills that you've got that you would never have had. So you've got resilience now, you've got self-management now. And the kid's been, you know, working in his home office, basically in a little room, he's got his computer in it at home. and basically studying and doing it himself. That's a trait that will do him so well in future life. So yes, he's missed out on some of the other stuff, and I feel really sorry for him for that, but he has learned some really cool skills as well. And I think let's embrace the cool skills and let's use those as we come out into the next stage of post-COVID.
Yeah, I love that. I really do. And you said something that I think is really, really key about how, you hope that some of these skills and behaviours we keep in our industry. And it's funny because when we talk about, mental health and recruitment, there are always conversations that come back to the fact that individuals that do this job are very, very resilient by nature. There's a tenacity there, there's a lot of grit, and that, if people, the role in itself and the industry can be very, very stressful, and nobody disputes that. But for me, it's just breaking down that myth that mental health doesn't impact everybody, because it absolutely does. And I think what you just said there about the pandemic and what COVID has taught us is absolutely bang on, because you can be the best, the best recruiter, the best business owner. You can be tough, you can be strong, you can be resilient, you can thrive on that. Maybe you're the sort of person that achieves because there's that undercurrent of what I call good stress, and that's fine. But the thing about mental health is that it's not just about, one particular sort of compartment over there in the corner. All it takes is for something outside of work to come in and hit from the sidelines, and it can have a massive impact on people that are brilliant performers, that have always consistently achieved. And I think that's where I hope we retain those good behaviors. I hope that we look at people now and understand that it isn't actually their ability to do the job that could cause them problems, but it could be external factors. And I think you're right. By and large, I'm seeing definitely more empathy from leaders that get that realize that, the lockdown, especially the first and second one, impacted them. Was very, very detrimental, and they probably saw signs of stress and anxiety that they never had before. So yeah, I'm a bit like you, James. There's that, the silver lining. What have we learned? How can it make us stronger for the future? But then I think that's how we have to be as humans. That's how we've evolved. That's how we adapt, right, and overcome.
Yeah.
So.
Well, no, I agree with you, and I go back into, what's the one attribute trait, I think, of an amazing recruiter, of an amazing business leader, of a salesperson, of most people in business, is that you genuinely, authentically care about what it is that you're doing. And I mean that, I really, really sincerely mean that. If you're doing things purely because you're trying to make a quick buck, then actually when things come in sideways and things go wrong, it hurts, it's uncomfortable. When you genuinely care and you genuinely want to make a difference, you generally enjoy your product, you like your product, you're proud of your product, you're proud of your business. When you generally care about making a difference to a candidate's life, because actually that is a person sitting behind that I've just placed in a role. That to me is one of the best traits in recruitment. All the top performers I've ever seen in recruitment have a genuine interest in the well-being of the people that they work with, peers, clients, candidates, everything else. So that trait, genuine authenticity and care, has been absolutely insinuated over the course of COVID. And that's a great thing. That's the one skill I don't want us to lose as an industry. I think it's made our industry 100 times better because of it.
That's it ties into something I was going to ask you about. It's a question I ask quite a lot on the podcast, but when you think about business owners or business leaders and mental health, not just COVID but mental health, what do you think they should be doing for their people and why? And you've almost answered that. You've said about that authenticity and that caring and that and yes, being very, very true. But is there anything you would add to that? Is there anything else that you think business owners should be doing in our industry in terms of how they view this kind of stuff?
Yes. I mean, we can't get away from the fact that our business, any business, is delivered by people. The recruitment is a people industry. That's it. Yes, we're focusing on profit. Yes, we're trying to create maximum valuations in our businesses. That's my job, is to help companies be more valuable and potentially exit for a greater shareholder value and so on and so forth. But the reality is none of that will happen unless you've got the right people in your business who are genuinely engaged, and want to make a difference. Now that's why some of those companies who have found it really difficult over COVID and coming out post-COVID with this whole remote working thing, is because in the past they just haven't really generally trusted their staff before. So they're now going, well, I can't possibly have staff not working from where I can see them every day because I can't really trust them, they're going to do the good job. Rubbish. Let's just change the story a little bit. Let's change the playbook and let's treat our people like adults. Let's give them the tools to be able to do the job. Let's trust them a little bit more. And I think a lot of people are doing this now. A lot of people are learning this now. A lot of people have embraced it and done a great job because of it. To me, it just goes back to the situation. I sit in a room in my office, you've got 30, 40 consultants sitting around you. They are 30 to 40 people with lives, with problems, with families, with everything, with fears, with concerns and everything else. If we can embrace that and them to understand that we are the same as well as leaders, then we can do so much more, I think. When we start sort of just pointing people around and treating them as if they are just an extra 10% on my profit, then I think we're getting it slightly wrong.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, for sure. Thinking about your journey, everything that you've gone through in your life, knowing everything that you know now, what piece of advice would you give your younger self?
It'd be pretty simple, actually. Is just don't take it seriously. I don't take life seriously. I really, really don't. I find it fun. I think it's a big game. It's bizarre. I don't have control over the game because someone decides when my game finishes and that type of stuff. And it could be in 10 minutes time. It could be hopefully in 50 years time. I don't know. But the reality is just don't take it too seriously. I think we there's a great expression that don't sweat the small stuff, which I really like that. We get hung up on so many things that just aren't that important, but we make them become really, really important in our heads. And then it's really hard to then walk away from those or let go of them. So for me, it's just don't get hung up on, don't take it all too seriously, because it's not that serious at the end of the day. I always look back and thinking, I always say to myself, what do I really enjoy in my life? If someone gave me an hour, what would I do with that hour? Well, what would I do with that hour? I would definitely have my barbecue on. I know that for a fact. I'd be definitely on the beach. I know that for a fact. And I'll be surrounded by the people that I love and care for. And that's it. Other than that, there's nothing else I want for my hour. It doesn't matter how big my house is or how fast my car is or how much money I've got in the bank or what am I wearing. Not particularly, no, because that's the hour that I want to have. So yes, don't get me wrong. I aspire to have nice houses and cars and all that sort of stuff that we all do. But it's not my important thing for me. The important thing for me is, what's the stuff I enjoy doing? I don't like wearing trousers. I like wearing shorts. So I'm going to carry on wearing shorts. I go to board meetings in London in flip-flops and I will carry on doing so. And I don't care. If people don't like it, they don't like it. It's fine. But I know I can make a difference from what I do as opposed to what I'm wearing. So I'm rattling on a little bit there. But I suppose for me, it's like, don't just take life too seriously. It can't be. Just go and enjoy what we've got. And if you've got a moment to do something, go and do something with it. Don't waste it.
Amazing.
I find that one hard with my kids when they're on their Xbox all the time. It's like, come on, get out and do stuff. Get off the Xbox. There's something great out there. Anyway.
The thing that resonates with me about that piece of advice to your younger self is that I actually don't think, I think, I don't know, I didn't know you then, but I reckon that you've always been like that. I reckon that younger James probably, did he take life too seriously? I can't imagine it. Not
particularly, no. But then, but then you think about the things that you used to get hung up about, sort of stuff. That bully at school, and I was thinking, really, what was all that about at the time, or or that email, that social media post that someone wrote about me on, all these little things. You think like, really, why am I worried about that? They're the ones who should be worried about that, but they're the ones who are fixated over me, and not me about that. So. Yeah. So to me, it's, I think that I always look back and think, what are all the things that have anchored my life and slowed me down? And there's a load of things, right? We never had the perfect journey. And I look back on those and think, well, what caused those anchors? And those anchors were the fact I probably got a little bit hung up on stuff that I just really didn't need to bother about.
I really like that, really like that. And I need to bring this back because I did mention it earlier on in the podcast about Paul Clark introducing me to a particular book by Dr. Seuss. And I know that the book meant something very, very special to you. But what was it about? I mean, perhaps you can tell our listeners the book I'm referring to and why it meant something and the message actually.
I think this book probably summarizes me perfectly, actually, from an immaturity point of view, because people say to me, what's the most groundbreaking business book you've ever read. And I talk about a Dr. Seuss comic book, basically, but that you can read in 2.5 minutes. But no, so the book is Oh, the Places You'll Go. And I've actually given it to a hell of a lot of people over the years, because it's, to me, it is the best life learning business book ever. It's an amazing read. It's absolutely brilliant if you read it. Because I love the pictures and the language he uses, because he's completely off the wall. But the reality is, it's all about the fact you go on a journey and you have ups and downs and bumps and that type of stuff. But at the end of the day, it will come good if you want it to come good. So yeah, so I've always had that book, and a lot of times people, when I've known people who've gone through rough times and tricky times, I bought them a copy of that book and sent it to them. It was the book I read it every single night to Toby when he was in the intensive care unit. So before we went to bed type thing, I would read it to him every night. So it's a very, very important book to me for a whole host of reasons. But at the same time, sort of post the Toby situation, it's very important to me now, because actually, if you just read the story, and I say it takes you can watch it online, it takes 2 minutes. It's the most sensible bit of writing you could ever possibly read, about a guidebook to how to live your life, because life is not a linear journey. It's ups and downs and that type of stuff. That it's how you manage the ups and downs is the determining factor. And yeah, so it's a great book, and Paul and I used to talk about it quite a bit, actually.
And he's taken up your mantle of sharing it with people. To my knowledge, that's when I went and did some work with the guys and talked about resilience and managing your emotional journey. He was like, "Oh, stay there." And that was when he gave me the book. And so what a legacy that's created as well, which is,
well, for sure, but Paul was one of those guys. He's one of those guys, when you sit down and talk to Paul, it's just, you feel so comfortable and relaxed. There's a real genuine interest and care there, and it's for a very, very successful businessman. He's one of those guys that I just love used to getting to know about everything about him. And that's exactly the sort of person I would say, I'd rather spend my life with people like that than people who have got some sort of ulterior agenda or motive, or I'm even concerned about what their agenda might be. That to me just doesn't work for me. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, but sometimes you don't know who they are. Sometimes you have to kiss a few frogs to find out.
But that's also the journey. That's life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Final question, last question. Thank you, James. Any advice for listeners that can identify with anything that you've shared today?
I think my advice I'll give to people, and I go back to, we all go through challenges. My challenge was my one, and for some people they say that's a big thing. For other people, I've seen them go through worse things than anything else. It's my thing, and it is what it is. We all go through challenges. My only bit of advice to people is just be really open and honest about how you feel, and B, who you share that with. And I think that's, to me, is really important. I've got an amazing group of friends around me. I'm very, very lucky and fortunate around that, who say the right things, do the right things, know how to respond to me at the right sort of time, and I feel comfortable to open up to them. There's a particular friend of mine who lives over, luckily for him, lives over in the Caribbean, actually, and he's one of my sailing friends, sort of stuff. I'm incredibly close. I call him my soulmate. And he knows exactly when to say what to say at the right sort of time. And I feel so comfortable to say anything to him. I'll open up about anything to him. I think having people around you that you feel comfortable you can do that with is really, 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 really important. And never feel embarrassed about your journey, I suppose, is, again, it goes back to that thing. It's not about other people's opinions about you. It's about what you feel. There's a whole thing around, do you look yourself in the mirror and feel proud about what you did today? And I think that's a really important part of it. So, for me, be open and honest about your journey, and don't feel embarrassed about anything that you've done, mistakes that you've made, but make sure you've got people around you that you can share that with, because I think that's hugely, hugely important. And you'll then figure out your way of getting through the downs and the hard times and that type of stuff through that. But
amazing advice. James Osborne, thank you very much. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, man. Lovely to see you as always. Thank you.